I first met Sanjay back in, I think it was late 2009, might have been 2008. At the time, I was drinking quite a bit of red wine. I was overweight. I was smoking and working, significant hours, we'll put it like that. And I remember being challenged by my mum one Sunday lunchtime, and she said that I'd got lots of people helping me around business, but I hadn't got anybody helping me with my personal life as a personal coach. And off the back of that prompt, I then set about trying to find somebody to work with me personally. I went off in all sorts of different directions, and then I was reminded by a chap called Alan Brighton that I'd met Sanjay. I think it was a couple of years beforehand with regards to Sanjay using Greenstones, which is my accountancy practice, to look after his financial affairs. And at the time, the fit wasn't quite right. So I was reminded of Sanjay. I then got in touch with Sanjay, and he came up. And I can still remember sitting we have a red office in the office at Greenstones. I remember sitting in the red office, and Sanjay, over a period of a couple of hours, sharing with me the models that he was using. And in that moment, I had numerous realizations about what I was doing as an individual that wasn't serving a purpose for me.
Do you mind if I drill into that detail then? Do you remember some of those insights? Is there one that stays with you still?
Yeah, very much Tia. So thoughts, emotions, thoughts, emotions, actions, and results, which then go round and round and round and round. So at the time, I was very much into NLP, neuro-logistical programming. I'd been doing lots of Tony Robbins stuff, which was all around language patterns and mental language patterns and blah, 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 positive thinking, basically. And the realization that those thoughts were creating emotions. And once you've had a thought, you can't change the thought. By the time you thought the thought, you've already thought the thought. So it's too late type scenario. Even if it's a positive thought, then very often you have a negative thought about whether the positive thought was positive enough. So you end up with negative thoughts and positive thoughts. And the realization that those thoughts drive the emotions, and those emotions are much easier to be conscious of, become aware of, and then decide whether they are useful emotions or not, which then leads to the actions, which then drives the results, was revolutionary to me, definitely. So that was the first one. And then the release technique and struggling around the 3 questions. And then the simplicity of that, and how the mind tries to make it confusing and tries to challenge you on something because you effectively feel unsafe. Then there was a conversation around the wants, and very basic at that point compared to where I feel that I am now. My desire to seek other people's approval, be liked, self-sacrifice around that. And then ultimately, Miranda, the way through SOAR of basically going to courage or acceptance or peace, and the difference between knowing and believing, and knowing what is right. So there was a massive amount. It was that I know now that it was effectively the day's course in a couple of hours, and ultimately the 3-day course that was the 1-day course that's now. So I walked out of that meet. As I say, I walked out of that meeting having a complete mind shift and just basically wanting to find out more.
Wow, that is it. So what you're saying to me, I'm just reflecting back, in that original 2 hours of meeting Sanjay, you've just summarized a huge amount of insight. That is incredible. But it really was like that, was it?
Yes, is a simple answer to that. I don't believe Sanjay teaches it like that anymore, or shares it like that anymore, on the basis that there is a huge amount of content in that, which is a day's course and a 2 days course. But the conversation, and obviously your memory and your mind plays tricks on you. And then I went into the one-to-one coaching, and my mum got terminal cancer, and there was a load of stuff that came up around that, and the tornado and the pendulum and all the other stuff that gets thrown into the mix to aid my understanding. But definitely that day, that afternoon, as I say, sat in that red room was a complete mind shift. It was from NLP, which I was beginning to have reservations around. I still use, but from I'm going to say an ethical perspective rather than a manipulative, influencing perspective. So my challenge around NLP is that it's the practitioner fixing the individual. So you're doing something to somebody, whereas with Sanjay's work, it's you that's taking responsibility for the decisions and the emotions that you're experiencing, and it's up to you to do something about it. So as much as Sanjay acts as the facilitator, it's my responsibility to do something with it rather than for me to be hypnotized or be coached or to be your fast phobia model, whatever it is. So for me, it's I want to say a step up, which sounds as though it's egotistical. For me, it's a more ethical way of an individual making progress.
Mm. So, I mean, you touched on it when this all happened. Obviously, you said, possibly drinking too much red wine and working huge numbers of hours. I mean, at that point, obviously, you were aware something needed to change. But how damaging was that to the way you were leading your life at that time? It sounds like you were exhausting yourself, to put it mildly.
Well, there's an interesting aspect of work and work-life balance. I was enjoying work. I was working hard. I'd taken on a lot of responsibility. I'd just bought a business. I wanted that to be a success. I didn't understand at the time that I was suppressing my emotions through red wine, basically, and comfort eating and food. I wasn't exercising. However, I was late 20s, early 30s. If that had carried on for a number of years, who knows where that might have ended up? Exhaustion, heart attacks, diabetes, blah 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 blah. Who knows? Was it good for me? Definitely not. I was single at the time. I didn't have an opportunity to meet people because I was effectively I was working. I was going out on a Saturday night and a Sunday night, and I'd run a marathon and various other different bits and bobs. So it wasn't completely work, but fundamentally, I suppose inside there was a part of me that knew that I had the trappings of success. The appearance of success, but it didn't feel successful, I suppose, because I was having to pedal hard. And I have a bit of a phrase now that sticking wings on a bike won't make it fly. And I was pedaling hard trying to make this bike fly. And I know in reality, I needed to look at the bike and work on the bike rather than tacking things onto the bike in order for it to take off. So I was conscious of it. I remember that morning or that Sunday lunchtime with Mum when she asked the question and made me more conscious of it to the point where I got motivated to do something about it. But who knows? If I hadn't have had those conversations, life is a funny thing like that.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that I think a lot of entrepreneurial spirits share with you, which is if you enjoy work, you want to invest more in it. You don't realize necessarily there's a problem because you're doing something that you feel is helping you to thrive.
And that's the dichotomy of it. So I enjoy work, I love work, and I enjoy helping people. The tagline is to inspire, challenge, and support business owners and their teams to be the very best they want to be. So I can get very sucked into it, and I don't really consider it to be work. I mean, people talk to you about being a burnout and hobbies, and it's just a part of my being, a part of my life. Where I think it becomes a problem is where it starts affecting other parts of your life. So family, relationships, community, your drive with team members and all that sort of stuff. So obviously it can get out of hand, but I'm not one to believe that you need to have time off from work any more than you need to have time off from running or doing jigsaws or knitting or whatever else it is that you do as a hobby. If you enjoy doing it, that's a different scenario to if you resent doing it and have to do it, albeit it all needs to be done obviously in balance.
So on that day when you first met Sanjay and you had those 2 hours with him, and you had all this realization, I wonder, looking back, were there certain aspects to what he was saying to you that enabled you to switch? So, for example, you said, it all seemed so simple. So I wonder if there was something about you thinking, I can save so much time. I don't know, were there elements of what he was saying that really drew you to this new methodology?
Again, it's difficult thinking back just 10 years ago.
Sorry.
It's okay. Again, I can memory plays tricks and where it happened, but the stuff around the wants and seeking other people's approval resonated with me. And again, I'm talking from the benefit now of 10 years worth of conversations, meditation, and all the rest of it with myself. But I knew intrinsically that I was sacrificing myself, mainly time, in order to work with other people. I'd work for free. I would work long hours, so I didn't have to ask other people to do things for me. I wouldn't tell team members what I thought. So all of those different things. And then once I became conscious of that, or became more conscious of that, I can then make a conscious decision as to whether that is in the best interests of me, the customer, and the wider community. Now, I'm not saying that I don't still sacrifice my time. Sometimes I sit there and think, you silly person, Simon, you've gone through the same process again. And I do still consciously know that I am sacrificing myself in order to help other people, as we all do, because we're all, generally speaking, nice human beings. But it was that fundamentally my relationships with other people as to how I sort of, if you like, I got that time back. I became more direct and probably more definitely more courageous in certain circumstances, but more accepting that if I keep pushing, then very often I'm pushing things away as opposed to allowing things to happen as they want to. And now I'm saying that out loud, Miranda, it's not necessarily about allowing things to happen. It's about creating an environment in which they happen. So it's not a passive. I'm not one for the secret and meditating and humming on a park bench and all that sort of thing. There still needs to be stuff to happen in tier. Action is one of the 4 stages. So you need to do stuff. It's just doing the stuff from the right emotional state rather than through wanting to be liked or whichever other want meets your fancy.
So if you look at your work since then with Sanjay, can you describe to me the benefits of that? I mean, I'm getting an idea. Yes, you release time, you release energy, but if you're able to give me other examples of how you feel it's changed your life and therefore had a beneficial effect on the way you've shaped your business and what you've got involved in since then.
The first thing that comes to mind is how I work with customers in particular, but also team members. So if I think about the relationships with customers, if I go into a coaching relationship or into a coaching environment, if I'm going into that conversation being self-conscious, I want that customer to like me or the potential customer to like me, or I am challenged or don't want that customer to be upset by something that I say, then I am bringing all of my business into that conversation, and that's affecting in my opinion, that's affecting my performance and my ability to deliver not necessarily value, but maximum value to the person that I'm coaching. And that applies the same with team members. So once I've become conscious of the emotional state that I'm in, the ability to change that state. So if I'm going in from a point of acceptance and peace and knowing that whatever happens in that meeting is the right thing to happen in that moment, I'm less panicked, I'm more relaxed, I have more clarity of thinking. It gives me the ability to listen instead of trying to come up with the questions that I'm going to ask. So it is more in the flow. And ultimately, it gives me the ability to ask the questions that come up to me without fear of reprimand or upsetting the customer, and therefore me not being rejected. So I can ask a question. If a customer says, no, you're talking rubbish, Simon, or that's a silly question or whatever, obviously I can then choose to challenge them on that or accept it and then move on, but without baggage being upset, having fear of asking the next question. So there's a freedom that comes from it to be, I suppose, to be more Simon and less acting and trying to perform in a way that I think that the customer or society at large thinks that Simon should be performing. So it helps me to help myself fundamentally. That's where it is. And then because I've helped myself, it then helps me to help team members, friends, family, customers, the wider community, etc., etc.
Yeah, so that's with your clients. You mentioned team members as well. Is it similar principles apply then, that you're not worried about getting their disapproval, for example?
Sorry, Miranda, you broke up then, just as you
Oh,
were
yes,
saying team
sorry.
member. That
No,
was the video, I think.
yes, it was whether the same applies with team members as well, that you're not going into conversations wanting their approval. You mentioned.
Very much so. I can think of scenarios in the past, pre-Sanjay, where, well, even when I started the journey with Sanjay at the beginning, I could think of an example where I've had conversations with team members where I could have been far more informative, far more forceful around what it is that I was sharing. And because I was reserving my opinions and my thoughts because I didn't want to upset them, nothing changed. So that was, in that scenario, it was just a waste of my time, their time. They didn't know because I wasn't clear on what it was that I wanted to deliver. So I was doing a disservice to them. There are also situations when you employ people that they come to you for advice, and it would be very, very easy to fix it and say, well, if I was you, this is what I would do. Once you've got the tools and you've learned the tools, you can get out of your own way, get out of your own ego, and you can coach them using the tools. Some people are more open to that conversation than other people. So I've got team members that, if I can think back 10 years ago, completely were against the conversation, whereas now, as time has progressed and they've seen more and heard more, they're more open to having those conversations. But fundamentally with that, Miranda, if you think about judgment and how you judge other people and they are judging you, I now look at that element of that process, that judgment, as a gift for me. So what does that say? What does that say about me? And again, it's a conversation I have regularly with customers. Instead of me trying to force other people to change, if I look internally about what it is that I dislike about myself and then choose to change it or not change it, as the case may be, then very often the relationship with that team member or customer changes as a natural consequence of me changing. And changing myself, if that's what I choose to do, is a damn sight easier than trying to change somebody else, because most often than not, they don't like being changed.
Wow, incredible insights. And as Sanjay was saying, also, since he's got to know you, you have gone on, obviously, to create the mastermind groups and so on. And how much would you attribute, obviously, you've got influences coming from all over, but how much would you attribute what you've learned from Sanjay that has allowed you to do that? Is that...
The material that I shared or that I learned from Sanjay has been a fundamental part of my development over the last 10, 15 years. There's no doubt about it. If I had to name, I could name 4, perhaps 5 people that I would put in the same box as Sanjay with regards to advice, coaching, consultancy, information that they've shared with me. One's a very dear family member. The other 4 would be in the commercial environment, for want of a better phrase. So I've received information in exchange for money. So certainly from a personal level, so Sanjay has been a massive part of that. So my last year, and when I talk about alcohol, I go into this approval around, did I really drink that much or not? And if people are watching this, do they think that I was drinking too much? I don't consider I was drinking any more than the average person, although it wasn't helping me fulfill my role and the things that I wanted to do. So since the start of the Sanjay process, I'm now 3.5 stone lighter than what I was when I began that. Last year, for the best part of 15 months, I didn't have an alcoholic drink at all. And presently I'm drinking occasionally, but it's when I'm choosing to, rather than it just being the force of habit. I'm sleeping better, which is therefore giving me more energy. And as I say, I'm going into meetings with customers, and ultimately, and this is not for me to say, but because they're getting better service or a different quality of service, a different level of service to what they would get from normal coaches, then they are more likely to recommend and more likely to join the community, and they experience the higher energy, and then the whole thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I am just a small part of that bigger cog, Miranda, that we are all part of.
So that new community, that's the mastermind groups, is it? Because I've read some amazing testimonials about you. You must, I mean, that's great. You must look back and think, I had one business and now I've grown a whole new community. That's pretty humbling, really. Pretty great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the Greenstones has developed massively, and that's the baby that pays the mortgage and pays all the other things. The community of accountants, the accountants mastermind, and the mastermind groups within that wider community, I think is a wonderful thing, because everybody is coming to it under the banner of inspiring, challenging, and supporting, and they are communicating with each other and they're sharing. And albeit I might be the person that's brought that together and facilitated it, ultimately it's the people that's within that community that are carrying the energy. And as you know, the more people that come together, like-mindedness, the bigger that community will get. So as much as the testimonials, when they name me and they share them, I take, obviously that plays to my approval buttons very, very nicely. As much as I take the credit for it, there is a massive amount of work that goes on in the background, both of the members and team members, that effectively make me look good.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get what you're saying. It isn't just about you. And but I know that actually really uplifts Sanjay, the knowledge that I'm guessing that some of the things you've learned from Sanjay, you're able now to share with that wider community, I imagine.
Oh yeah, very, very, very much so. And it's one of those scenarios where, as a coach, as a facilitator, guru, whatever language you want to call it, that work that's come from whoever Sanjay worked with, it came through Sanjay, it's come through me, it's now going through my community, and hopefully that will be passed on. There's a real buzz for me when you get an email, a private email that you can't share, from somebody that's heard from somebody else that what you've shared, and they've taken it and they've done some work, and it's changed their life, not necessarily drastically, but they've become more conscious of it. And it can be as simple as I had a good night's sleep last night for the first time, because they have got some resolution around perhaps a family dispute that they've had, or whatever it is. So yeah, I get a huge buzz about it. And you've prompted me, Miranda, to think about how I share that gratitude with not only Sanjay, but with other people in my community or within my life that have enabled me to pass on their gifts from me to other people.
And yes, I know, having spoken to Sanjay, he does find that really rewarding, actually. It's that feeling that, people will make it their own, you'll mold it in your own way, but it still does good to other people. And that is a fantastic gift, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm realizing we're nearly hitting the half hour. So if someone came to you and said, I don't know, emotional mastery, don't know anything about it, what the hell are you talking about? What would you say to convince them to at least have a conversation with Sanjay, just an initial conversation?
If I think about different scenarios where I have recommended Sanjay, fundamentally it's around a challenge. And now I'm thinking out loud, very, very often it's about a relationship that they're having or they're experiencing difficulty in. And for me, it's a really easy tee up. It's a no-brainer to have a conversation with Sanjay for half an hour to an hour just to see whether there's any go. So sometimes the question will be, so what have you done? And they'll give you a long list of all the things that they've done. So I've tried everything and failed. Okay, well, you've not tried Sanjay. Have a conversation with Sanjay and see how that might change your opinion on it. But if there's So Sanjay has a phrase: when you're fed up of being fed up, you will take action. Yeah. So are you fed up of being fed up, or are you just having a moan? If you're having a moan, okay, I'll gladly listen and I'll accept that moan. And if it helps you feel better at the end of it, then fair enough. If we're having the same moan 3 or 4 times, then clearly you're wallowing and you're dragging and it's not going anywhere. And I'm a bit, I can feel myself getting wound up about it now. I'm a bit, do something or be happy that you're doing nothing. And if you're going to do something, speak to Sanjay. If you're going to do nothing, then fair enough, but just shut up. And I don't, there is a limit to my, what should I say? If you're aware of what you can control and what you can't control, or what you can influence or what you can't influence, and there's a quote, I can't think what it is now, Miranda, but have the good grace to accept what you can't change. So just accept it. And if you can change something, then instead of blaming that other person because it's all their fault, go internal and then see whether it's you that should be changing. Because it's far, as I say, it's far easier to change yourself than it is try and change somebody else. I'm not sure whether that's answered the question, but I know it's a more generic conversation, I suppose, that to a degree happens over time, because there's an element, Miranda, where people, it scares them, and there's always this, and I talk about it a lot from a coaching perspective. Very, very often people know what it is that they should be doing. They just need an excuse to do it. And if they've known that and they've not done it for the last 5, 10, 15 years, they would look pretty stupid if they turn around and go, well, I've known that for the last 15 years and now I've done it and it's right. So they need a coach, a hypnotherapist, a Sanjay or whatever it is to give them permission to take action and not look stupid. So I've given up smoking because I've been to the hypnotherapist. Okay, well, all you've done at the hypnotherapist is made a decision. You could have made the decision without going to the hypnotherapist, but you would have looked stupid if you'd have done that, because you could have made the decision 15 years ago or however long they've been smoking. I'm not sure if I've answered your question other than just waffle on a bit, but that's kind of how I do it.
I always say when I interview people, waffle is pure gold. Actually, that's where the joke comes from. Don't knock waffle. I think that should be my next article in praise of waffle. Is there anything else you want to add? I mean, it's clear I don't know whether it's gratitude, but you've got a strong relationship there. And just anything else you want to add about Sanjay?
I don't think so. There is, as I say, Sanjay's counted as one of 4 people in my life that had a dramatic influence on it, and continues from a business sense. No, I just from a thank you point of view, and keep up the good work is the simple answer, I suppose.
Okay. Look, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to go